Well, your host, Dan.
What is a whole year?
It's been a whole year now. I moved into the new house in May, and I know we started maybe a month before then.
Roughly our one.
Yeah,
Now we're about a chapter away.
yeah,
Where,
yeah, yeah.
I think we've had a lot of fun. Next question.
Yeah.
So to pick those,
He does. They are. Your dog was licking me. I wasn't laughing at Jacob dying.
I was off.
That's right. Yeah. All right.
Uh, that was Friday.
Cool.
Final.
Not that he has to make amends with them, right? Maybe they need to make amends with him. They weren't very nice to him. Yeah, big old onus.
No, I.
It's got to be what ONUS. All right, talk about something else, and I'll look it up. Remember that guy Honus Wagner?
I do.
I don't think it's the same thing.
Baseball card.
You know what is weird? We got what 50 chapters of Genesis. It's Genesis. It's you know what Genesis means? The beginning or something.
Yep.
The point is, then the last 20 chapters are just about Joseph.
Ending.
About endings. No, what? Are just about our Joseph, you know? He's just I don't know. I mean, in a way, I mean he's important for the Israelite narrative, obviously, because that's how the Israelites came to be, ostensibly. But it just seems weird because it's like Genesis, but Genesis isn't really. I mean, a third of it, a whole third of it, has nothing to do with. They could have had another book called Joseph. That's all I'm saying.
Almost. Up to this. I was.
Okay.
I just.
Do you think Abraham was in their book at all?
No.
Just a smaller part, not at all.
Probably.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That they probably had.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. The North liked Joseph because he started the tribes, which became Israel, right? Now, why did the South like Abraham? Okay.
And those.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh. Okay, so the reason they talk so much about Joseph is because of his two sons. You know what they could have done is just been like, hey, let's start with talking about the two sons. Like, seeing what their life was about, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know anything about them, right?
we learned, talk about back to
Hmm.
I will learn.
All right. I mean, I think that's the most important part is knowing that Ephraim and Manasseh were children of Joseph, which is why the North cared so much about him because they were the North's strongest tribes or what have you,
Yeah.
and the South cared about
And more.
okay.
Down.
So he was connected with Judah.
But
Mm-hmm.
it does
Mm-hmm.
feel
Ever since I read about that hypothesis, I was like, "That's it." You
makes
know,
perfect.
yeah, like you can't even have somebody explain why it wouldn't. I mean, you can, but I'm like, nah, get
Makes
about
sense
it.
of all the
You know, I feel like every time we talk about anything in Genesis, we always come back to the priests. You know,
yeah.
and so it's impossible almost to. It's impossible to talk about it without the hypothesis.
I know. Question.
Mm-hmm. Right, the motives. Yeah.
Anyway, that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, it all does, but you want to start it up then? All right. Let's see. You know, there aren't that many verses. Yeah. All right. 1 and 2. Then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him.
Never heard that before.
And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So, what do you think counted as physicians back then? Also, did they do embalming back then? Surely it must have been quite different than currently. I I don't actually know what we do today. I don't know what embalming is, but I have to assume it's different. It was different back then. Um, I think I remember that the Egyptians would get embalmed, and have their brain drained out through their nose.
Yeah.
I think that's right. Otherwise, it's really a messed up memory.
Solving
That was probably only for the pharaohs, right? They didn't do that for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Probably just get thrown in a mass grave or something. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The guys like you. Although I would
Not cool at all. All right, keep going. Is that right? So you would like embalm a salad?
quite this. I mean, idea body.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to know
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Right. I don't know. That, like, but whatever test. He's
You know, when COVID was running around, I would get these tests, and I'd stick one of those things in my nose.
father died.
I was barely paying attention. It's fine.
Right.
What?
Joseph.
Well, yeah, right. I mean, I think that worked because Joseph does end up dying at some point.
Yeah, he's gonna.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
I don't know. So my spell check wants to put an and between servants and the physicians. And oh yeah, and Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians. So I know it probably means that the servants probably went and got the doctors, but why wouldn't the translators add that for clarity?
The New
Okay.
King James.
Well, were the so maybe the physicians were his servants?
That's it.
That's weird.
Gotta put the
Huh.
servants.
That's why. Oh, why would you even bother mentioning that?
Said
Right. Why? Yeah. Why does it matter that they're his servants? Okay. So, well, then why did they do it?
well, I mean, writing us.
Mm-hmm.
Clarify.
It would be odd to just bring in some servants to embalm your father, right?
Right.
We were like, I was just cleaning the bed sheets. What? I gotta, pull his brain out through his nose. Yeah.
And it,
Servants.
servant.
Okay. Okay.
Doctor.
Okay.
So the king got a pretty.
Yep. Yeah. I didn't even check the message on this one. All right. I never have to check it again, but it tells me so clearly what I'm reading. Is it? Uh-oh. How long has it been off?
Long enough.
How long have people not been able to hear you?
I don't know, long enough. It's on now.
You want to just repeat everything real quickly?
No, it's fine.
Well, they heard me, which is...
Yeah, they heard you.
Yeah, they heard me. I'm sorry.
It's not your fault. I don't know why my microphone off. Maybe when I moved it last time, it turned itself off.
Yeah.
Anyways, to repeat some of where we were.
Check this out, the message. Joseph then instructed the physicians in his employ to embalm his father. In his employ. That's good, right?
That is a lie.
What?
Because there's a word for somebody who's employed.
Uh-huh.
It's like shakir.
Uh-huh.
The word evid here implies an actual servant, and servants typically were not employed. They could be serving for a period of years.
Mm-hmm.
They could be lifetime servants. They could be slaves. But there is actually a word for an employed laborer, and that's not what was used
So this is really
here.
just like their residency.
This is their resident servants.
Yeah,
like a handmaiden or something.
I was trying to make a joke.
Right. Oh, wait, what?
A residency for doctors, before they become
Oh,
real
I didn't
doctors.
catch it. I'm sorry, I didn't.
Okay.
The joke went over my head. I
It
apologize.
just wasn't really
It
good.
was a good joke, though.
Okay,
It
thank
was a
you.
good joke.
All right, you want to continue?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So the physicians embalmed Israel. Wow, the whole country?
Yeah, right.
Oh, wait, never mind. Isn't that silly? Isn't that silly?
Isn't it such a strange way that they just go back and forth
Yeah.
between Israel and Jacob? I have to assume there was a point in which, like, one textual tradition always called him Israel, and one always called him Jacob.
Mm.
And then when they combined it, they're like, well, if we just go back and forth, we can convince them that his name was both.
Uh-huh.
Of course, he's going to have a name change. You got to have that.
Yeah, and then they won't upset some block of people a lot, right?
Yeah.
Who are saying, it's Israel, it's Jacob.
Right, of course.
3. 40 days were required for him, for such are the days required for those who are embalmed. And the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. I assume this has already been answered. But why 40 days for being embalmed? Hey, it wasn't answered. How dare you? I mean, obviously it goes without saying that 40 and 70 were probably just chosen because of their religious symbolism. That feels like that's how it is all the time when they use a number 4 or a number 7 or a number 12 or a number 3. Still, it's a long time. What do you think everyone was doing all this time? Is it a true mourning where you don't do anything and just be sad? Or is it like, all right, a moment of silence for this guy you don't know. Okay, that's long enough. Get back to work.
It's hard to say where the numbers originated from, but we do know from Jewish tradition, Egyptian and Greek tradition, and others that these were kind of standard periods of mourning. The difference, though, is like typically you might have, we'll say, like the balming period of mourning. The balming, I can't speak. The embalming period might be like 40 days, right? And then you might move the body somewhere else for another period of time. To be mourning for a full 70 days is weird because typically the period of mourning was only 30 days. You can kind of see that in Numbers chapter 20, verse 29, Deuteronomy 34:8, Deuteronomy 21:12, and others where it literally states that, the period of mourning is typically 30 days. So if you have a 40-day period of, we'll call it embalming and decomposition, and then you have 30 days of mourning, you end up with the number 70. But the problem is, like, realistically, you would be doing those things concurrently. You'd be mourning for 30 days while the 40 days of embalming are underway, right?
Yeah. So embalming was basically just spraying the body with cologne or something so that it didn't get too smelly.
A little more intricate than that, but yeah.
Is that what it is nowadays too?
No, now they drain your fluids and fill you with like formaldehyde, and yeah, once you're embalmed in modern society, there ain't no coming back. I mean, the bodies do move around every once in a while you're.
Don't talk.
If you ever talk to a mortician,
yeah,
sometimes they have movements even after they're embalmed.
Why?
Just a chemical reaction in the body. Just like if you, I think it was someone put salt on a dead fish that was already skinned, and it started to move around.
Be quiet now. I'd just run away and never come back.
Wow, you're not cut out to be a mortician.
No. All right. So the guy dies.
Right.
They're not going to bury him for how many days did we determine?
For some time. It's hard to say because everyone had a different tradition. So, like, if you go to Herodotus said that the body was going to be spiced and placed in a resting place for a full 70 days. And then it would be moved to like a more permanent location.
Yeah, I don't know how long it takes a body to like actually start smelling up.
I don't know. See, that's the thing is I don't know how long it takes for a body to stop smelling. right? Once you have a dead body, how long does it take before it stops smelling? Because it starts smelling pretty quickly.
You think so?
Well, yeah, it decomposes fast.
What is fast?
Like within days, it's going to start really decomposing quite drastically. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons why the Romans would incinerate all the dead. If they didn't throw you into a mass grave, they typically had you cremated because that was considered more sanitary.
Okay.
Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, the question here is, how many days did they actually mourn, and how many days was he actually embalmed before they moved him? It kind of seems like they mourned and they embalmed him for all 70 days, really. Because it says 40 days were required for him, for such are the days required of those who are embalmed. So he was embalmed for 40 days. We assume they were mourning for those 40 days as well. And then it says, and the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. So it just seems to me like he was embalmed and he was mourned for 70 days, which might be a figurative number. It might be because they were Egyptian as opposed to Hebrew. It might, just be the custom of the Egyptians to mourn for a full 70 days instead of 30 or 40 days.
So how much decomposition are we looking at on 70 days?
Well, I don't know. I'm not.
Well, because you're telling me that nowadays we use like embalming fluid or something.
Oh yeah,
But back then they certainly didn't do anything like that, right?
We use formaldehyde nowadays.
Whatever. The point is, I doubt they used that back then, right?
No.
And so they were just throwing like perfume on it.
Well, let me. I'm going to read you a snippet from Diodorus, from Sicily.
All right.
In the histories written by Diodorus, he gives a pretty good description of the embalming process that you might find interesting.
All right.
It says, the men called embalmers, however, are considered worthy of every honor and consideration, associating with the priests and even coming and going in the temple without hindrance, and being undefiled. When they have gathered to treat the body after it has been split open, one of them thrusts his hand through the opening in the corpse into the trunk and extracts everything but the kidneys and the heart. And another one cleanses each of the viscerae, washing them in palm wine and spices. And in general, they carefully dress the whole body over for 30 days, first with cedar oil, and certainly other preparations, and then with myrrh, cinnamon, and such spices as have the faculty not only of preserving it for a long time, but also giving it a fragrant odor. And after treating the body, they return it to the relatives of the deceased, every member of it having been so preserved intact that even the hair and the eyelids and eyebrows remain, the entire appearance of the body unchanged, and the cast of its shape recognizable. This explains why so many Egyptians keep the bodies of their ancestors in costly chambers and gaze face to face upon those who died many generations before their own birth, so that as they look upon the stature and proportions of the features of the countenance of each, they experience a strange enjoyment as though they had lived with those on whom they gaze. So seems to me that the process in Egypt, at least, is that is a 30-day process to embalm and to spice, and then the body is handed over to the family.
Now that was only done to like the very wealthy, though, right?
Well, yeah, but Jacob was second in the land.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to figure out. I mean, they wouldn't do that for just anybody.
No, not every bloke. That costs money.
But it costs a lot, huh?
Yeah, it was customary for some people to do that. They would do some embalming and mummification for their children at home because it was, I mean, they wouldn't give it the full treatment, but they often had a lot of care, love, and reverence for children that passed away.
I get that
early.
Man, that would be
I mean, because how do you tell a mother not to, preserve the dead child? That's the worst thing you can experience as a parent is to lose your child early, right? In fact, in Carthage, they would quasi bury the dead children in clay pots. Then they would fill the pots with dirt, and then they would actually keep the pots sometimes on the property somewhere, or sometimes they would put it in like a cemetery near a holy place, like a holy site, where the babies, there would be clay pots full of babies that were basically left upon the sacred holy ground somewhere, hopefully allowing them to make a safe passage into the afterlife. There's a lot of burial practices of the ancient Near East that we could talk about. The fact of the matter is, what seems to be happening here, if I had to guess, is it kind of seems like Jacob's getting a little bit mix of the Hebrew and the Egyptian treatment. He probably had 30 or 40 days of embalming, and then a full 30 days of mourning at least.
But they were mourning while they were being embalmed.
I would think so, for a full 70.
Now, what is mourning?
Well, there's two actual mournings. They're like, hey, we're sad that our relative passed, and then there's official mourning. Official mourning is when you actually have the body, and you make a public spectacle of wailing and mourning and fasting and wearing black clothing and sackcloth and ashes and things like that for a full 30 days. In fact, mourning was so common that it was a whole profession. People called it criers. You could pay a crier or a handful of criers to come and mourn and wail and shout with the family for the period of mourning, because it was a sign of disrespect if the person wasn't adequately mourned. It's kind of like even in modern times, if somebody shows up to a funeral wearing like bright Easter colors, it is kind of frowned upon because it's kind of expected that no, in order to show proper respect, you have to be like sullen and downcast, and what that all ties into the ancient practices of mourning.
So how would this affect the common folk? Would they not really, you know what I mean?
There was still a period of mourning.
I'm sure there's a lot of them who didn't really even know who Jacob was, right?
Well, that's the thing, is it's baffling to me that the Egyptians have given him such great treatment. I can only assume that the purpose behind the treatment for Jacob is because of their fondness for Joseph.
Right, yeah.
Right. And we'll see that later on in the chapter, the type of treatment that Joseph gets when he dies, because his treatment is above and beyond.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That was, yeah, I think that wasn't too bad. You know?
Yeah. So let's move on to the next passage.
Okay.
If you could figure out how to use the mouse. Verses 4 and 5.
You know what? These mice do not work right on Macs. All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. 4 and 5, as you said. Now, when the days of his mourning were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, if now I have found favor in your eyes, please speak in the hearing of Pharaoh, saying, my father made me swear, saying, behold, I am dying. In my grave, which I dug for myself in the land of Canaan, there you shall bury me. Now therefore, please let me go up and bury my father, and I will come back. Okay, I can summarize this passage like this. Joseph, second only to the Pharaoh, but realistically probably more powerful since I imagine the people loved him at this point, goes up to Pharaoh and is like, hey, my dad died. Can I please get a couple hours off from work? I'll make it up, I promise. Then Pharaoh goes, what do you think? I mean, we're basically co-rulers. Like, I'm going to say, hey, listen, any other time, but right now we got the summer harvest, and I just can't spare a single worker. Maybe next time. But why is he even speaking to the household of Pharaoh? I mean, what's that even mean? He still has to butter up some people first before the Pharaoh would agree. Pharaoh's probably like, thanks for saving my kingdom, but my grandniece says you're not a very nice person, so my hands are kind of tied. That's what I took away from all that. It was just like, what?
Yeah, it's a strange request because Joseph second in all of the land.
Uh,
I think maybe it would seem like getting permission to go and bury his father is an act of politeness. It's possible that he didn't really need permission, but he wanted to be polite to his his master, the Pharaoh. Remember, is part God. And make sure everything is on the up and up, because when the second in command just ups and leaves for whatever weeks, months at a time,
mm,
I mean, things change. Think about if you have a company where the boss of the company is just going to be gone for an entire month. You're like, okay, well, what now? Who do we go to? Who's answering the questions, right?
well, how long do you think he was planning to be gone?
I have to assume it was for at least a couple weeks, because you've got to make a trip with a large number of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a small thing.
It's not that long, a couple weeks. I thought you were going to say a couple months.
Well, it could be even a couple months, but it doesn't seem that way from the narrative. But yeah, I mean, he's been gone a couple weeks.
Do you think he got like an entourage of soldiers and stuff?
Well, we're gonna find
He
out.
was probably pretty important, huh?
It's coming up. It's gonna be.
Oh, that's funny. I already read this, so
I know, it's almost like the answers, like in 2 more verses.
too bad yeah, okay. All right.
Right. Let's read 6 through 9.
And Pharaoh said, "Go up and bury your father as he made you swear." So Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, as well as the house of Joseph his brothers and his father's house. Only their little ones, their flocks, and their herds they left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very great gathering. Very great gathering. There we go. So that sounds like a lot of people who probably didn't know Jacob. I could talk. Jacob, or even cared that he died. But I bet if they said that but I said, let me go. Okay. That sounds like a lot of people who probably didn't know Jacob or even cared that he died. But I bet if they said that, they'd be beaten or killed. I remember a video showing the death of Kim Jong-il and all the very over-the-top weeping and screaming. I wonder if this was similar, where it's like, you better look sad, because otherwise, ...
I actually think has a lot to do with it. I think a lot of it's for show. I think even the language in the text is super over the top. I don't think that what it literally says is true. It says, we'll explain why in a second. It says the elders of his house and the elders. This is where it gets unrealistic. The elders and all the elders of the land of Egypt.
Yeah.
That's unrealistic. Not every elder of the land of Egypt
So it's
went
just
with them.
Pharaoh. That's it.
Because the elders were in charge typically of running things in these large metropolis areas. Like the elders were the ones who sat and heard judgments in cases. I mean, these are really important. So it's unrealistic that all the elders of Egypt went. I think that's kind of bombastic language or like a hyperbole. Then it says only their little ones and their flocks. Okay, so we can assume that the women didn't go either. So it's all men.
Right.
Right. So that's one thing. But I mean, if we assume that the text is literally true, there's thousands upon thousands of people. And the reason why, as well, is because just a couple chapters earlier, remember, literally everybody became a servant. It says,
oh, yeah,
all the servants of Pharaoh. Okay, well, in Genesis 47, it says Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, and all the Egyptians sold their fields because the famine was so severe upon them, and the land became Pharaoh's. As for the people, he made slaves of them from one end of Egypt to the other. Only the land of the priests he did not buy. So, but I think the language in here kind of betrays probably what really happened. Probably just some of the elders of Pharaoh's household went with him. Probably not all the elders of Israel. And not all the servants of Israel either. It could be just some of the servants of Pharaoh. Obviously, it doesn't whoever was writing this was not being careful to observe that just a number of years earlier, everybody became a servant of Pharaoh. That seems to be like a little bit of an oversight. The fact of the matter is, a lot of people went, but we don't know how many.
And they might have written about Jacob's funeral, and they're like, "Yeah, this is good." Oh crap! There's got to be even more people that go for Joseph, right?
Well, that's the other thing too. Is like, it's hard to say. Like, it might have been a big procession, but it's hard to say if the author or editor of the narrative had motivation to try to make it even bigger. To kind of big up
Right.
Jacob.
Yeah, right. Or
Right.
Joseph, you mean, right?
Well, right now it's Jacob, right? They're
What?
burying Jacob.
Oh, it's hard to remember who's dying.
I know.
Oh, so this is Jacob right
it's
now.
still Jacob.
Well, ignore what I just said. I'm sure it's even bigger for Joseph. All right.
You would think so.
It was probably everybody in the world.
a lot of people, yeah. So, yeah,
Man, that's a lot of people for somebody that I doubt many people even knew, right? I mean, he was already pretty old when he
they
started.
didn't know. Yeah, they didn't know who he was.
Yeah, they're like, oh, he's Joseph's father. Oh, okay. Guess I better care.
I assume this was all kind of a charade, kind of a show of respect to Joseph. Probably had nothing to do with Jacob, right?
Well, yeah, definitely.
That seems to make the most sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I keep thinking of that video of the women screaming when Kim Jong-il died, and
right.
People look at it and like, wow, they're so brainwashed, and I'm like, I think they're just afraid of dying if they don't look very sad.
What choice do they have?
Right? Yeah.
Right. The other option is like going to the modern day version of the gulag.
Yeah. They weren't sad enough.
Basically, I think that's what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's read on. Verses 10 through 11.
We're getting through this a little quickly. You want to take an intermission or anything?
I think we're good. We might finish this within 3 hours.
All right. Well, then we can start. Exodus.
Never gonna happen.
Never gonna do Exodus, huh?
We're never gonna do more chapters in a night than what we actually prepared for. I don't know why you keep thinking that's
just hopeful. All right. 10 and 11. Then they came to the threshing floor. All right, let me cut that out. I like to put that up there so I know what to cut out. All right.
Yeah, huh?
And then they came to the threshing.
We're not editing this, right?
I know, but it's still funny, right?
Just checking.
All right. Then they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, and they mourned there with a great and very solemn lamentation. He observed 7 days of mourning for his father. And when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, "This is a deep mourning of the Egyptians." Therefore its name was called Abel Mizraim, which is beyond the Jordan. This makes sense. Just kidding. It doesn't. I don't really care at this point. Atad. I don't know where this is or why I should care. I think, maybe it happened, maybe it didn't, but it was just included to let readers know how this Abel Mizraim got its name. Isn't that how, like, almost all of the things in Genesis are? They're like, all right, here's a weird name. We named it at some point in our lives. We don't know why we named it that, but here's a somewhat plausible reason.
Right. And you would think if they bothered to include it in Genesis, that maybe it would come up later in the Bible, but it really doesn't. Like, I looked to see if anyone knew where this location was. No one seems to really know where it's at.
In the Bible?
On the map.
Oh, okay.
We can't really positively locate this city or this location.
So they had to have been doing it just for the people, like contemporaries, right?
Could have been, yeah, for sure. For people who lived at that time. It might be a city that was only briefly inhabited. That's why there's not a lot of archaeological remains. It's hard to say sometimes, but what's confusing to me is the fact that they just rolled up to a location in Canaan,
yeah,
and then renamed it like it was their city.
Well, yeah,
right.
Yeah,
isn't that weird? Like, I can only assume that this was written later, and they're like, oh yeah, of course, this is how it got its name.
Right, because Canaanites were living there. I assume they weren't just waiting around for a good reason to name it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you're not just, if you're a Canaanite, you're not just going to let someone roll up to your city and rename it.
Right.
That didn't really happen.
Yeah.
But I think Nahum Sarna, a really popular commentator, posits a better theory,
Okay.
which is that, and this coincides with archaeology. The town for sure was an Egyptian site, not Canaanite.
Okay.
I mean, it was in Canaan, but it was Egyptian controlled. The region, not the town. No one knows where the town really is, but the region that they're referring to
Because
here.
Canaan was pretty close to Egypt, right?
Yeah. The region that they believe that this city could have been located in, even though they don't know where the city would be located in, was in fact controlled by Egyptians for a long period of time. And in fact, I'll read you a snippet of what he says. He says, southwest of Gaza, on the eastern Mediterranean coast, alongside the desert road that connected the Hyksos capital in the Nile Delta with Asia. So it's somewhere along the route from the Hyksos capital, which is roughly where Goshen is, the town of Avaris, up into Canaan somewhere. And it says, just a little to the south on the same highway lies Deir el Balah, where a large collection of Egyptian-style anthropod clay coffins have been found in the Late Bronze Cemetery. The place was a burial ground for high-ranking Egyptians serving in Canaan for Egyptianized Canaanite rulers and dignitaries. Such an association would explain why the cortege halted at Abel Mizraim for public homage to Jacob and his own country, in his own country. So basically what he's suggesting here, and this is little known to people who read the Bible, but it's everybody who studies archaeology knows it. At the time that this would have been happening, Egypt controlled Canaan. This narrative
The whole thing?
that Canaan was like separate from Egypt,
Right.
kind of silly. Geographically, obviously, it was separate, but almost all of the city-states in Canaan were controlled by petty kings under the reign of Pharaoh. So the fact of the matter is, there's nothing extraordinary that there are some Egyptian burial sites within the land of Canaan, not too far from Egypt.
How long did they own Canaan?
Centuries.
Really?
Yeah, in fact, at the time that the Exodus would have happened, Egypt still had control over the Canaanite territories. That basically lasted all the way until the Bronze Age collapse.
What are you saying?
Well, what I'm saying is that the designation between Egypt and Canaan is not as separate as people would like to think. Egypt really did control a lot of what went on in Canaan all throughout the patriarchal and the what we would call the Hyksos period as well. So that kind of explains why.
So this wouldn't have been that hard to believe then, I guess.
Right, it's actually not that hard to believe. The burial site that they're referring to here would be a good location if we could confirm it to where that fictional or that unlocatable city might have been.
So where's Canaan right now?
Israel?
Is that right? Canaan is Israel?
Well, Canaan gets conquered by Israel, and then it becomes Israel.
Yeah, but I mean, Canaan's pretty big, right?
It's the same size as modern Israel.
You think so?
Well, I know so.
How come they don't just dig up all of Israel?
They have.
All of it?
They've been doing it for a long time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because there's got to be a lot of stuff.
There's a lot. They find new stuff like every year.
You know what I'd like to do is move to Israel and then just buy one of those, things that excavate. An excavator.
A little more complicated than that. You can't just take a bucket to the ground.
Well, a big bucket.
Usually it starts with like geological surveys to make sure that you're digging in the right place, and then you might do like ground penetrating radar to
probably don't need to know any of that since people have been living there. There's probably stuff everywhere, huh? Even though I have no idea how any of that works.
You can't just guess.
Would.
You always got to start out with a survey of the land to see where the most likely spot for a settlement might be, or for a structure of some
I
nature.
mean, back in the day.
Yeah, but rather than wasting your time guessing, you can just use like ground penetrating radar and look for structures underneath the dirt.
I wouldn't be guessing. I would just be having fun.
Well, archaeologists get paid to find things. They don't get paid to have fun.
I don't think they get paid that much either way, right?
Not great. Only the ones that get paid well are the ones that they double as like professors, which most of them do. I don't think a lot of people realize that most archaeologists are in fact employed by some university. Almost always. Not always, but almost always.
Listen, this is getting about as off topic as something can be, but let me ask you one question. How does that work?
How does that work?
How does it work that you find buried things?
What do you mean?
Like a whole city buried.
A lot of times by accident. Sometimes you find them when you're just digging for a new project.
Question, how does that happen?
How does what happen?
How does a city get buried? You know?
Oh, you're not asking me how to find it. You're asking me how does it get buried?
Yeah.
Well, typically the building, like you always find building ruins. And usually that's because the building itself got toppled and destroyed.
Okay.
And then just over the course of time, the dirt kind of piles up next to the various ruins, the rubbles, right? And then a lot of times what will happen is people come and they'll decide, well, let's repurpose this land and either finish the destruction or throw dirt over top of it, or let nature, run over top of it. And so some structures you'll find that are still like sticking out of the ground a little bit. Some structures are completely buried. Some structures are really buried. You'll find some ancient civilizations that are buried, under feet or yards worth of earth.
Okay. How does that happen?
And, just the natural process of, dirt moving around on the earth.
Let me ask you a question.
Various causes.
All right, you see this house you're in right now?
Yeah.
How long would it take for it to be, like, people to, you know what I mean, to want to archaeologize it?
Well, it would depend, because how much of it is left when it gets toppled, right? Like you don't find just a fully formed building under the ground.
You don't think?
No, you just find like basically the foundation. Because when you destroy a building and topple it down and whatnot, usually the only thing kind of left standing is just like the foundation.
Well, why is there all these, like plates and stuff like that? You know what I mean?
What do you mean?
Like artifacts.
Yeah, what about them?
Where did they come from?
From inside the house, or the temple, or whatever it is.
So the house gets toppled, but there's still stuff in the house.
Yeah.
And nobody picks up the clay pots or whatever. They're like, I'll just leave them there.
Well, half the time these things are going on because, an invading army came through and killed all the men and stole the women and children, or realistically, they killed all the children. They killed the men and the children, and then the non-virgin girls, and kept the virgins for themselves. It's typical.
And then what? They just leave, and then nobody comes back to this place?
No, they burn the whole city down. They destroy it.
Okay.
They topple all the houses and structures and burn the city down, and they leave it in a pile of burnt ruins.
And then how does that turn into archaeology?
Typically, somebody buries it and starts over on top of it, or they rebuild the ancient ruins only to have it toppled again.
Why would you bury it?
Or it just remains uninhabited.
Why would you bury it? Why wouldn't you just pick that stuff up?
Well, because sometimes it's an important site, and you don't want to just let the site go to pot. Sometimes you want to rebuild the important site. There's a number of ancient Babylonian sites in which the ziggurat, the original ziggurat that was there, was destroyed and rebuilt like 2 or 3 different times. Because it was believed to be a holy site for a particular deity, right? So if the temple was destroyed by an invading army, it was angering to the deity that was living there. So the next king, when they came back in power again, the next king would typically have it rebuilt out of respect for the deity that once lived there.
Also, I mean, did they take like a bulldozer and just get everything out of there? Because you're telling me that they didn't.
It's all done by hand, man.
Where are the artifacts? Where did they come from? They're just like, here's a bunch of plates and spoons and stuff. Let's just pour a bunch of dirt over top of it.
Yeah, honestly, that happened.
Why?
Why not?
I don't know.
They don't care.
I don't know.
If this house falls to the ground, do you think you're caring about preserving it for archaeology 2,000 years later? No, you're just gonna bulldoze it, build over top of it,
And you're assuming that,
or leave it in ruins. How many houses have you seen burn down and then just get turned into a lot?
I don't know. It's just confusing. I don't know how
They just fill in the basement, run it over with dirt, and call it a day.
You know, because I remember I was reading one of those books about Israel, and how they were talking about how they, they had found a lot of artifacts and stuff, but like whole cities were covered. And I'm like, how would a whole city be covered? I think somebody would notice. I don't know. You know what I mean? I think that made sense what I said. Yeah. Let's cut all this out.
It's all live, buddy.
Cutting it out,
I mean, you could have like chat GTP'd all these questions before we started.
Oh, I see, huh? What else? You want me to just replace you, huh?
Yeah.
Really?
No, I'm joking.
Fine, I'll just do this next time with. Oh, wouldn't that be interesting? Just do it myself.
Dan
then
and
just,
ChatGTP.
Just read off of it, you know?
It'd be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't need friends when I have a computer.
I mean, you still need friends.
That's what I thought as a child.
You can just be selective about which friends.
Okay. And let's go ahead.
Let's move on. Yeah.
Anything other than this?
Yeah. What we're talking about this city. Why they stopped there? Because he wasn't buried there, but they stopped there to mourn. I can only assume it was because it was an important Egyptian city in which many important Egyptians were already buried.
And you wanted to mention a threshing floor?
Yeah, I just thought it was strange that they went to the threshing floor, because the threshing floor is not usually a place. I mean, it was a place where you did communal business.
Isn't a threshing floor like where they kill cows and stuff?
No, that's where they ran sleds over the grain.
Let's see about that.
Where they would run sleds over the grain.
Okay.
After they've harvested it, everything, so they can separate the wheat and the chaff and all that nonsense.
Well, maybe that would. Okay.
But typically a threshing floor was like a communal space. So you could have markets there. Hell, you might even have prostitutes there.
Why don't they just go to marketplace then?
Well, because it was a threshing floor.
What's a threshing floor again?
What to study is where you take your grain and have it run over with sleds, and it basically, pulverizes the grain, separates it from the stalk, and then you take a winnowing fork and you throw it up into the wind, and the wind blows away the chaff. Because the grain is heavy enough that when you toss it up, it just falls, but the chaff on the outside gets blown away by the wind.
No, we don't like chaff, right?
You don't want chaff. So you run it on the threshing floor using a sled.
Hey, what do you think would happen if the chaff was heavier and it didn't get blown away?
It's not, though.
But if it did, this kind of makes you wonder if God kind of designed it like this.
They probably would have found a better crop.
You could just say it was, a miracle.
I don't know if it is.
In a way. Well, what's the floor called where they kill like cows and stuff?
Slaughterhouse?
Yeah, but there's like a floor, isn't there?
Usually the temple?
Oh, in real life. I mean,
the butcher?
Yeah. What's that called?
The butcher.
It's called like the killing floor, but
could be. I don't know. I've never butchered before.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never threshed either, but
yeah. See, all right, whatever. I'm okay. I'll look that up later.
Right. Anyways,
I'll forget. All right. I'm gonna try to be more prepared for Exodus.
I believe you.
Yeah, me too.
Let's read 12 and 14.
Okay. So his sons did for him just as he had commanded them, for his sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah before Mamre, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittite as property for a burial place. And after he had buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, he and his brothers and all who went up with him to bury his father. I remember this cave. It's the one they wanted to give Abraham, but he insisted on paying for anyhow. So, are there any archaeological? This is fun. Are there any archaeological? Are there any records?
Yeah. If you go to Israel, they kind of think they know which caves these people were buried. Archaeological.
Archaeological. There we go.
Here, you got it. Nailed it.
I'm not drunk. I'm just stupid, everybody. Okay.
Yeah, these are tourist sites, actually. You can
This
go...
is a tourist site?
Yeah, you can go to Israel right now, and they've got a lot of these
Is this
burial
like,
caves marked out.
Is this like the real cave, or is it just like, we kind of think
we
it
have
might
no
be?
way of knowing if it's a real cave.
Really?
We can only guess.
Yeah.
You know?
Why?
Because we don't have, like, the records. There are no records. Like, nobody left clay tablets saying so-and-so was buried here.
Why not?
I don't know.
We do that.
I don't know.
They're called gravestones.
I don't know, buddy.
They didn't have gravestones back then?
They apparently not, because we would have found one.
Well, how would you remember who was buried where?
Your family history. They weren't thinking about somebody 2,000 years later.
I mean, at least 50 years later. I mean, people are going to have to remember, right?
You know, half the people who are living in biblical times thought that eventually God was going to end the entire world and redo it. And they weren't worried about somebody coming around thousands of years later and digging them up.
Well, they were worried enough to find a good gravesite for them.
Well, yeah, you want to give them a good resting place.
Even if they're going to be coming back in a couple of years, huh? That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Was there something else?
I don't think so.
Oh, yeah, you were going to say something, right?
Well, I had a note there, but the note's kind of irrelevant now that we read earlier, because I think it invalidates what I was saying in my note. I was saying it's really weird that along with the sons of Jacob were all the women and children who were kidnapped from Shechem.
Yeah.
But as it turns out, I forgot that the women and children were left behind. But it is still weird that, these women and children probably had to mourn the death of Jacob along with everybody else, which is odd, being, it's a weird juxtaposition, thinking that, a couple of decades earlier, their husbands, brothers, and fathers were all ruthlessly murdered, and then they were kidnapped and taken.
Huh. So they were probably mourning because they had to.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, if we don't mourn, we're going to die.
That's what you did, man. Life was cruel.
Yeah, I mean, life still is cruel, but you got to admit, a lot of this stuff seems pretty messed up.
Pretty barbaric.
It's probably similar in Iran or somewhere, right? Saudi Arabia,
Yeah, it's true.
Middle East, crazy places, right?
Not all that different in some places of the world. It's still going on.
Yeah.
Well, you read about the ISIS brides and all the people, the women that ISIS kidnapped and, forced into, we would call it sex slavery, but to them it wasn't, because you can just get married and divorced. That they would buy these women, marry them, make them sex slaves, and then divorce them and sell them to somebody else. And it was basically sex slavery under the guise of marriage and divorce.
Did the women have any say in it?
Of course not.
Well, it sounds like slavery to me.
Women don't matter in that religion at all. They're just property.
Which is funny, because it seems like women shouldn't matter in our religion too, then, if we're basing it off of Genesis, right?
Well, if we base it off the Bible, to be honest, women don't matter.
Yeah.
Women have value only as childbearing vessels. You don't really get any amount of equality talk whatsoever until you get to the writings of Paul. But even Paul's pretty damn misogynistic. So I got to be honest, I think if more women read the Bible, it would be hard for them to remain Christian.
Oh.
Because it's just not, it doesn't paint a good picture of women, to be honest. And in fact, up to this point, women really don't matter. Says nothing about whether or not they're even participating in the covenant community. Remember, the only sign of the covenant was circumcision, which doesn't even include women.
That's right.
I mean, what does that tell you about the status of women, right?
Well, we know Rachel was important.
Well, because she was beautiful, right? The only important women are the hottie toddies.
Yeah.
You can almost tell that it was written by men for men.
Almost. Yeah. That's great. Okay.
Let's read 15 through 17.
When Joseph's brothers saw that his father was dead, they said, "Perhaps Joseph will hate us and may actually repay us for all the evil which we did to him." So they sent messengers to Joseph, saying, "Before your father died, he commanded, saying, Thus you shall say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespass of your brothers and their sin, for they did evil to you. Now please forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of your father." And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Anything to show how pious and wonderful Joseph is, huh? His brothers are pretty silly, though. All right, so did they really think that Joseph was going for the long con, waiting for his father to die before exacting his revenge? That's some Count of Monte Cristo stuff right there. See, and like I'm well read. I never read it, but there's like a Simpsons episode on it.
You saw the movie at least, right?
No, that sounds too boring for me.
The movie was great.
I watched the Simpsons parody, and
enough.
that's really all I needed.
Good enough.
So I'm I'm pretty certain Jacob probably never said any of this stuff. I'm pretty sure Joseph would never fall for these obvious lies. I'm also trying to kind of understand what's going on. All right, so before Jacob died, he told Joseph's brothers to tell their messengers to tell Joseph that what?
Joseph says all this. It says, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, perhaps Joseph will hate us and may actually... So what they're saying is, it's possible that Joseph is only being nice to us because Jacob is still alive.
Mm-hmm.
But now that Jacob's dead...
Right, so this is their plan. Their plan was to say that before Jacob, their father, died, that he had told them to tell the messengers of whoever to tell Joseph that Jacob said that his brothers were sorry, and then that he commanded Joseph to forgive them as a last request. That makes sense.
I didn't understand a word you said.
I worked really hard to figure this out, okay?
It says, so they sent messengers to Joseph saying, before your father died, that's Jacob, he commanded, saying, thus you shall say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespass of your brothers.
Right, so that's Jacob saying this.
It's not.
But they're telling Joseph that, what? Hold on.
All right, so
hold on. So they sent, okay, so Joseph's brothers sent messengers, right?
Yes, to Joseph. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Saying, and then here's what Joseph's brothers told the messengers to say to Joseph.
Obviously.
Right? So the messengers are saying, before your father died, your father commanded, saying,
yes.
Thus, and this is what the messengers are saying Jacob said, even though it's really what Joseph's brothers said to the messengers that Jacob said, because Jacob didn't really say it. And they say, just you so...
Well, we don't know that.
Well, it's pretty obvious.
It's not.
Yeah, it is.
Well, it wouldn't have worked if he never said it.
It's obvious he didn't. How is he going to find... Jacob's dead. It's not like Joseph.
But Joseph would have called him a liar. Okay, if the messengers go to Joseph and say, hey, while your father was alive...
No, they're not saying it. They're just repeating what Joseph's brother said, so they're not in on this.
Incorrect. It says, so they sent messengers to Joseph saying, before your father died, he commanded you, saying, and then this is what his father said. It says, saying, thus you shall say to Joseph. So this is what the father said to the sons.
Right, but they're saying,
I beg you, please forgive this is what Jacob would have said to Joseph I beg you, please forgive the trespass of your brothers and their sins, for they did evil to you. Now please forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of your father. And Joseph wept, and they spoke to him. Okay. None of that, Joseph wouldn't have bought any of that if Jacob hadn't have actually said that to him.
No. We know he didn't say it.
He did.
Saying we know he didn't say it. We also know that
said
Joseph's brothers are just idiots, and so they're just using this. Now that Jacob's dead, they can pretty much say that their father.
All right, so
anything.
let me try this out.
Okay.
Let's imagine that Valerie's dead. Right, your wife is dead, and let's imagine you're mad at me because while Valerie was alive, I stepped on your foot really hard, and I thought it was funny, but it wasn't funny. Okay. Now, Valerie passes away, and I say, Dan, while Valerie was still alive, she told you to forgive me.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Would you forgive me unless Valerie actually told you that, or would you say you're a liar?
Well, that's the thing. You tell me that is stupid.
It's not stupid if she actually told it to you.
No. The idea is that I can't go to Valerie and say, hey, did you really say this? They're saying that we heard it, though, and you shouldn't call us liars because that was her last.
Because she said it to you.
No, she said it to them.
No, she said it to you.
No, you're the one. So listen, you're the one that's telling me she said it.
Try this again. It said, before your father died, he commanded, saying, thus you will say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespass of your brothers. Well, he must be speaking to Joseph because he's commanding Joseph to forgive the trespass of the brothers. No, his
brothers are speaking to Joseph, saying this is what Jacob commanded him, but they're making that up.
Incorrect. The brothers are reminding Joseph that before Jacob died, Jacob commanded Joseph to forgive the brothers.
Right, except for the thing, I think they only command, I think Jacob only, and I don't think this happened, but I think what they're trying to say is that, you were off doing whatever, but Jacob said to us, hey, tell Joseph that I'm commanding him.
Not the way that works.
Well, and then Joseph would be like, well, I'm pretty far away. I couldn't hear myself. Thank you for giving me the message.
All right, let's read it again. Before your father died, he commanded, saying, thus you will say to Joseph.
I don't think this is fair. You need to start from the top. Look, when they saw that their father was dead, they said, this is what they're saying, perhaps Joseph will hate us. Therefore, let us send messengers, our messengers, to Joseph. Okay?
Yeah, that's not hard.
And we're saying to the messengers, listen, this is what you need to say to Joseph. Right. Say, before your father, Jacob died, you know what I mean? He told us to tell you to say to him, I beg you, please forgive the trespass of your brothers. And now you need to forgive them because this was one of his last things he said on his deathbed. You weren't there, but we're just telling you what happened.
None of that works.
I was just going to look up the message, actually.
It doesn't work because what is the message? The message says, I beg you, please forgive the trespasses of your brothers.
Yeah.
That's speaking to Joseph.
Right. The messengers are speaking to Joseph.
Right. Relaying a message.
Relaying a message from
Jacob.
From who gave the message?
Jacob.
Who gave the messengers the message originally?
The brothers.
Right.
And
so it could have been.
And it only works.
But so they could have told the messengers.
And it only works if Jacob actually said that to Joseph.
No, it doesn't.
It does.
No, because Jacob didn't say it to him.
Why would Jacob not tell Joseph in person to forgive his brothers?
Probably because he was going to die. And Joseph was.
So he had enough time to tell the sons, but he didn't have enough time to tell Joseph.
That's what I'm trying to say. He didn't have enough time. He never said
How could he not have enough time?
The brothers are making this up.
I don't think so.
I mean, it's not like Jacob would ever actually say that.
I don't think Joseph is dumb enough to be fooled by his brothers a second time.
Right. And that's why I'm saying his brothers
And I don't
are
think
stupid.
I don't think he needs to be tricked into forgiving his brothers.
Well, that's what's going on. It's a joke.
I don't think it's a joke
We're
or
just like,
trick.
these guys are really stupid. Do they really think this is going to work? That's exactly what
I
we're saying.
see what you're suggesting.
Okay. All right.
But I don't think that's true. I think that the whole thing only works out if Joseph knows that they're telling the truth, and Jacob actually did say to forgive your brothers. Can you imagine Jacob and Joseph being reunited at some point, and Joseph not being commanded by his father to, hey, you got to bury the hatchet?
Why would he bother?
Because it's his son.
Yeah, but it doesn't seem like Jacob even cared about it.
You think Jacob is unaware of what transpired between the children? Like, he's not going to try to still be his father? You never stop being a father.
He's been pretty oblivious this whole time.
You never stop being a father.
When Joseph's... All right, hold on. Let me see here. After burying his father, Joseph went back to Egypt. All his brothers who had come with him to bury his father returned with him. After the funeral, Joseph's brothers talked among themselves. What if Joseph is carrying a grudge and decides to pay us back for all the wrong we did him? So they sent Joseph a message.
Are you reading the message?
You know it.
Why?
Before his death, your father gave this command. So they sent Joseph a message, and this is the message they're sending Joseph. Quote, before his death, your father gave this command. Here's the command. Tell Joseph, forgive your brother's sin, all that wrongdoing. They did treat you very badly. Will you do it? So now they're saying, will you do it? Will you forgive the sins of the servants of your father's God? Or whatever. The point is, you know what I'm saying? They're making it up. They're saying this is what Jacob said when he didn't really say it because they're afraid. I mean, you know, if they weren't afraid.
No, I see what you're saying. Okay. I'm not saying that that the brothers aren't suggesting that Jacob spoke to them to say something to Joseph.
But I'm saying that Jacob never spoke to them, and they know this.
But I think he did. I think he's probably spoke to all of his children on this matter.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot envision a scenario in which Jacob does not have a conversation with his son about forgiving his brothers for what they have done to him. I can't envision it.
He's been pretty hands off his whole life. He's not a good father.
Well, we don't know that.
I mean, he almost got Joseph killed by his favoritism.
Yeah, that was what, 50 years ago?
I don't know how long it was. It was pretty bad, though.
Are you really thinking that Jacob had no concern as to whether or not Joseph and his brothers would forgive each other?
I don't know.
That's literally the worst thing you can have as a parent is your siblings feuding with your children feuding with each other.
I'm just saying, to me, this whole thing just sounded like his brothers were afraid, and so they made something up.
I don't think so. I can understand why you would think that, but okay. I think that betrays the natural relationship that you would have as a father to your sons. I cannot envision a world in which Jacob would not have had a conversation previously with Joseph about forgiving his brothers, unless he was just an absolute a-hole.
Well, so what? Well, but so you're telling me that Jacob had a conversation with Joseph and said, hey, forgive them. And his brothers knew about this conversation.
No, I'm suggesting that he spoke to all of his sons at some point.
At the same time?
I didn't say at the same time. At some point,
okay,
there had to have been at least one conversation with his children about dealing with, the possible ramifications of unforgiveness.
Okay.
There's no way Jacob didn't have this conversation with all of his children. No way.
I don't think he did.
I think he did.
I don't think so.
As a father, I would suggest.
I'm a father too.
You're not.
I have a cat.
You do not have children. There's no way as a good father that you would.
And I never said
you would not address the biggest issue that has ever happened to your children.
And I think we both agreed that Jacob was not the best father.
Where does it say he was a bad father to his sons?
No, I'm saying that.
You're saying it. The text doesn't say that.
The text is very confusing here.
Text is.
Listen. Okay, listen. Why would his brothers have to remind Joseph of a conversation Jacob had with them?
He doesn't need to be reminded.
Okay, then why are they bothering?
This is them just being silly.
That's what I said. They're being silly.
Yeah, they're just being silly, of course.
Yeah.
Jacob doesn't need to be reminded to forgive his brothers. In fact, he
Joseph.
probably already has.
Right. But I think if he already had forgiven them, they would know this. I think what's going on is that they were just really afraid.
I think they were afraid.
They had to make something up off the spot. They said, listen, who is Joseph going to argue with? Is Joseph really going to argue with what they say their dead father told them? No, Joseph would never argue with that. He'd be like, well, it was what he said. I mean, I got to go with it. You know what I mean?
No, I find
It
that
was
to
his
be
last
irrational.
request.
I think Joseph would have been smart enough to say, no, you're making that up. If Joseph had not have been coached at least a little bit by his father at some point to forgive his
How would
brothers.
his brothers know that conversation took place?
I didn't say that they did.
They would have to.
They wouldn't.
They're just assuming that this conversation took place, and
No, they're not.
just going to Joseph and saying, "Hey, remember that conversation we never heard of, but we assume happened? Remember it?"
I'm not saying that the brothers are assuming that they're aware that Joseph had a private conversation with Jacob.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that at some point in their life, I find it 100% implausible that Jacob did not address this topic with his children.
So you're just
It is impossible. You are the worst father in the world if you do not address this topic. This is the topic that split your entire family apart. You're not just going to hope that it turns out. You have no business calling yourself a father if you're just going to wait and see.
All right, whatever. I honestly, I still disagree, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I just think his brothers were really stupid.
If you had 12 cats and one of them enslaved the other,
yeah,
you would do what you could when you reunited your cats to make sure they got along again.
would I? Because
You would.
they've already. I mean,
Because you love your cats.
the one in charge has already said, "Hey, listen, we're good." You know, I doubt I'd be
Was
thinking.
Jacob there for that?
Yeah.
Was Jacob there the first time he met with the brothers?
No, not the first time.
Exactly.
He was there when everything went better.
He was there, yes, but he wasn't in the room the first time Jacob and his brothers reunited
Right,
and,
so it
and
doesn't
wept
matter.
and fell on each other's necks and whatnot. So Jacob wasn't privy to all that.
Right. They
Right.
probably told him though.
Doubtful.
Oh,
I'm sure they talked about it.
so Jacob's a great father and talks about this all the time, but the terrible sons are like, we're never going to talk about how we wept on each other's shoulders.
Well, I'm sure they shared information, but
Okay.
again, Jacob wasn't there.
Oh,
All I'm saying
I need to write my.
is that this passage
Yeah,
is, I don't believe that they're tricking Joseph.
I think they are.
I can see why you would think that, but I don't believe that. If you
Okay.
just put yourself into the situation as the father of these sons,
Okay, but you're basically saying from your experience as a father, but you're not looking at the passage, right?
I am looking at the
You're
passage.
not getting the information out of that. You're just
I
saying
am.
this is what I feel, and I'm saying here's what I'm getting out of the passage.
No, I understand what you're getting out of the passage. I'm trying to tell you that there's no trick being played here.
Yeah, seems like there is.
Okay.
Seems like there is. All right.
All right. You're welcome to think that.
All right. Maybe I'll write my thesis paper on that, huh?
Sure.
There's got to be other people that agree with me.
Why would they risk tricking Joseph and getting caught in the trick?
They couldn't get caught because Jacob's dead.
They could.
They could say Jacob said anything at all. and they would
Joseph
never get
literally
caught.
could have said, I do not believe that he said that to you.
Okay.
You're tricking me,
Mhm.
and you're all in prison now. Do you
Okay.
think they would risk that?
Jacob would never do that because it was, or Joseph would never do that because that was
They
Jacob's.
literally went into a full panic when they found the gold in their bags.
Yeah.
Rather than believing Jacob was being nice to them, they went into a panic
Joseph,
and then
yeah.
and then ended up returning it.
Uh-huh.
I don't believe for a second that the brothers are trying to trick Joseph, the man that could end all of their lives. I don't think they're that stupid.
I think they are.
I don't think they would.
I think they are.
I don't think they're that dumb.
I think they're very stupid.
I think they were stupid when they were younger. I don't think they're stupid now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do not think that they were dumb enough to try to trick Joseph and risk getting caught in a lie.
Well, that's why Joseph was so sad. He says, like, you guys still don't believe me?
But that works out in either of our scenarios.
Of course it does.
Right? That doesn't require either of our scenario to be correct.
No.
Right?
He likes to cry a lot.
I don't find it realistic that they were trying to trick their brother.
Okay, and I do. That really seems like who they are.
Who they were 50 years ago.
We don't know. Well, we don't know who they are now. There's nothing written about them,
Right.
except that one brother, Judah, said,
Mhm.
"Kill me instead of Benjamin." Even though we all know, we don't know who it was. They probably just put it there
Mhm.
because they like Judah for the south, right?
Yeah.
All right.
I think there's more happening here than Joseph being tricked. I just don't buy it.
Okay. Whatever.
Anyways, I think we fleshed it out.
Yeah.
We'll agree to disagree.
How about this? Please vote in the comments. All right. Person who gets the most votes gets
Now, what do we get?
bragging rights.
I don't know if anyone wins on this one.
I win. If more people agree with me, I win.
No. I mean, I don't know if there's a way to have an answer to the text, right?
No, I just said majority.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, if you're assuming winning means the vote, I'm just saying that
That's
there's
what I was saying.
no way to confirm what the text is truly trying to convey here, whether or not there were private conversations
Well,
or not.
then, I mean, who would you believe? You wouldn't believe anybody then, right?
What do you mean?
Well, like some great scholar like Mr. Michael Heiser or something.
I like Michael Heiser.
Right, if you asked him and he agreed with me, would you be like, okay, well, I got to rethink this?
I mean, I could be persuaded.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, maybe I'll get a hold of him.
Yeah. Well, he died
Ah,
last year.
That's not helpful.
Had pancreatic cancer.
Whatever it is, that's too bad. There's a guy named Israel or something, right?
Israel Finkelstein?
Yeah, I'll get a hold of him.
He's still alive.
All right, and
He's retired.
Yeah, well, I can answer an email.
I don't think so.
I'm not gonna kill him to answer.
He's kind of a bigwig.
So, a big wig.
You could just pull the commentary off the shelf behind you and we can look it up. See what Klaus Westerman says.
I don't know who that is.
Okay, if you don't want to know the answer.
I only listen to authors of books I've read.
Well, listen, whether they're trying to pull a fast one or not, I do not buy for a second that Joseph is dumb enough to get tricked by his brothers.
I would agree 100%. He's not.
Right.
I'm just saying they're dumb enough to try to trick
Which
him.
means this trick only works if Jacob had said something to his sons about forgiving each other.
No. The point is that it was never going to work. They're just stupid.
I don't think they're that dumb.
I do. All right.
Let's carry on.
All right.
I wasted like a half hour on that.
I don't think we wasted anything. It's good to know that sometimes, you don't have all the answers. All right.
Well, I mean, hey, you could be right. Maybe I'm wrong.
You know what? I might actually look this one up later.
You're
a
allowed
lot
to
of
be.
times I say I won't or will and don't, but I think I might,
You're allowed to be right. I'm not always right.
Oh, thank you. You're very...
But we could look it up in the commentary and see what Westerman says.
Yeah, but you
It's
already
right behind
know.
your
You already
shoulder.
know what it's going to say, and that's not fair.
I don't know what it's going to say.
Fine.
I didn't look it up.
Where is it?
Right there.
Which one?
The,
This
the
one?
one that says Genesis
This one?
number 3.
This one?
That's the one.
All
All right.
You're going to make something up. I'm going to read it for
I'm
real.
not making anything up.
Whatever. All right, so what is this? 50?
At 50 verse 15 through 17.
All right.
If Klaus Westerman thinks that Joseph is being tricked, I'll issue a full apology.
Yeah. Well, if he doesn't, then I'm just going to find somebody who does agree with me.
Do you know how commentaries work?
Obviously, I don't. You think I've used one of these?
Don't you just give it to me?
Yeah, but you're fine. Just do it. Fine. Just take it.
All right. Okay. Commentary on 15. The brothers now become aware that become aware of what Jacob's death meant for them. Joseph could take vengeance on them now that the father was dead. There is no basis at all for their fear in what has gone before. The reconciliation narrated in chapter 45 implies a forgiveness that is definitive. There can only be a literary purpose behind repeating at the end of the climax of the reconciliation of Joseph's explanation. Then verse 16 and 17 says, the brothers are so afraid that they first send a messenger to Joseph. By means of the messenger, they inform him of a charge given by their father before his death. He should forgive the brothers of the evil that they have done. It was held earlier by G. Hobart and still today by G.W. Coates that this charge is a creation of the brothers' anxiety. Listen, this is getting interesting.
Okay.
Listen, you might be right. The majority, however, are of the opinion that it is a literary reworking, mostly by Herman Gunkel. This holds also when the brothers simply reproduce their father's intention. What is important is that the brothers are now still conscious of the evil that they have done to Joseph. So they add, Joseph should be so good as to forgive them because they are servants of the God of their father. It is their relationship with the same God, the God of their family, that binds them, so they refer once more to their father. It is noted that the notion of the forgiveness of sin is used twice in verses 16 and 17. It is deliberately avoided in chapter 45. Moreover, their father's words in 17 sound like a fixed prayer formula, which indicates an editorial work. The message causes Joseph to weep clearly because the brothers' mistrust in them had been reawakened. Perhaps, too, he is moved by remembrance of the events that had led to the reconciliation. And then it says, verse 18, the brothers now approach him themselves. They have no need to repeat the request, as often a gesture is enough. So, while Westerman's not clear, but if we take Westerman at his word, it sounds like he agrees with you.
Okay.
Which means I have to apologize and say that you're right.
Okay.
I mean, I still don't think it's realistic, but I think given Westerman's opinion, it is possible that the whole Jacob said to forgive us is a fabrication.
Well, I've always liked Mr. Westerman.
You've never read Westerman, but I do like Westerman.
Is he still alive?
No, he gone. Unfortunate. He gone.
I won't email him then.
But I told you, if Westerman suggested that you were right, I'd say you were right, so you're right.
All right, well. All right. I appreciate that.
You can savor this for a little bit. Just savor it. Just sit in it. Soak it up. Dan was right.
I've been right before.
I know you have.
All right.
All right. Well, good work. You read it very intently.
Oh, thank you. You know, I'm quite
so much so that a biblical scholar agrees with you.
Yeah. Means I'm a biblical scholar.
You're a biblical scholar now.
You know, it's a transitive property, I think.
Yeah, it is. It It transfers.
Yeah.
It's like sin in Leviticus 16. You just
push it on to your ancestors, right? Yeah.
All right, what were we reading? 1821?
I think that's
Right, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Then his brothers also went and fell down before his face, and they said, Behold, we are your servants. Joseph said to them, Do not be afraid, for I am in the place of... Wait. Do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God?
Wait, there's another option.
Oh, boy. What?
What if the message to forgive the brothers is a message that Jacob gave to the servants to deliver to Joseph beforehand, and the servants just didn't get there in time before his...
Well, then why would the brothers mention that the servants should send a message?
That's what I'm saying, right? Because I think what he's suggesting is that Jacob gave the message to the servants to give to Joseph, but it wasn't timely enough. Right? It says, so they sent messengers to Joseph saying, so this is the messenger saying something. Messenger says, before your father died, he commanded, saying, thus you will say to Joseph. It's possible that the messengers are saying, before Jacob died, he told us to tell you, and therefore it alleviates the responsibility, and it makes it appear like the messengers were just untimely, as opposed to the brothers trying to... It appears less like the brothers are making things up this way.
And so you're saying that the messengers would not lie.
Well, see, in this case, it is in fact a lie. It
Okay.
has to be, right? Because the brothers are telling the messengers to say it.
Right.
And if the messengers are saying, hey, before your father died, he told us to tell you.
Right.
If that didn't actually happen, then, I mean, if it did happen in real life, they would have told him without the brothers telling them to tell them, right? So in this scenario, in this alternative scenario, if we read it as though the messengers are saying, Jacob told us, the messengers, to tell you, but obviously he died too soon and everything, went down. If that's the case, it demonstrates a couple things. One, it looks like a better trick, because in this case, Joseph doesn't have to trust his brothers, right, in order to believe the report. The messengers take on the onus of not getting the message to Joseph in time. Could be 100 reasons why they couldn't have got the message to him in time. And also in this particular case, if that happens, if the brothers tell the messengers to say it, then it is in fact true that your case is correct, that it's all fiction, that Jacob didn't tell the messengers to say this. The brothers are telling the messengers to say that Jacob told them to say it. Does that make sense?
No.
Well,
no.
Your suggestion was that when it says, thus you will say to Joseph, that's a message that you believe Jacob was telling the brothers to say to Joseph.
Well, I'm saying it wasn't.
I know you're saying it's a lie. I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I'm just saying, but in terms of who's speaking to who.
Right, yeah.
Right. You're suggesting that when it says, thus you will say to Joseph, the you is the brothers. Right? So the message comes from the messengers, and it says, so they sent the messengers to Joseph saying, before your father died, he commanded us saying. So now we have the words of Jacob. What did Jacob say? Jacob said, thus you will say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespasses of your brothers. Well, in your scenario initially, you're saying that, well, this is something that the brothers are claiming that Jacob said to them. But this, in fact, can read just as easily as something that Jacob told to the messengers to go tell Joseph. And if that's the case, that takes the brothers off the hook.
I appreciate that, but it says right there that what you think they already knew what the messengers were going to say, even though they had no hand in it?
I'm saying it's made up. What I'm suggesting, though, is when it says, so they sent messengers to Joseph saying, before your father died, he commanded, saying, who did he command? What I'm suggesting here is the people in this fictitious story.
Oh, so you're trying to say that the brothers are trying to tell the messengers to not include them in this, right?
Yes, the brothers are telling the messengers to go tell Joseph that before Jacob died, that Jacob told the messengers to deliver this message, but because it couldn't get there in time, obviously because of the death of the father,
right,
so on and so forth. And that way it seems like a lot less of a trick to Joseph, because he doesn't have to trust the word of his brothers.
right.
Now he's just trusting the word of the messengers, and it's a much more realistic scenario.
So, I mean, what are the chances of the messengers lying to Joseph?
If they're stupid, they would lie. I don't know. But either way, whether or not the message is of Jacob was given to the messengers in the fictitious story or to the brothers, either way, the messengers would have to lie. Right?
Right.
I'm just saying, if you're Joseph, what's more believable? That
the messengers.
That Jacob commanded the messengers to give you a message?
Right,
or
because they have less skin in the game.
Right.
Right.
If they were playing a trick, this is a trick that would actually work, is to read it this particular way.
As long as you still send the messengers.
Right.
Right.
But I would also say if we read it in this particular way,
Mhm.
then it has to be true that it was fictitious and it was a trick.
Mhm.
But I think it's an honest reading as well.
All right. So there are two readings that support mine and one that support yours.
Actually, I think the third reading supports you, but it still makes it more believable, which helps me. 'Cause I
Okay.
don't believe that Joseph is dumb enough to be tricked by, hey, our father told us to tell you.
Yeah, but I mean, I still agree he's not stupid enough, regardless.
Right, I don't think he's
But you
stupid
think the
enough.
brothers were smart enough to realize that Joseph isn't that stupid
Right,
and decided they had to put some sort of a distance between them and the message.
right. Because if the risk of getting caught trying to trick Joseph is a huge risk. You got to approach this with like a lot of caution. Or remember, the brother was in prison for 1.5 years.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Well, we don't know really what was going on.
True,
My guess is he wasn't really imprisoned, or
it's possible.
you know what I mean.
Or he was getting the golden treatment,
Well, yeah,
like Joseph got when he was with Potiphar.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Anyways, let's continue on.
All right.
We've been at this almost 2 hours now.
Yeah. All right.
Good thing we didn't do another chapter, right?
This is your fault.
Oh,
All right?
I
If you had just
listen.
agreed with me at the beginning.
I mean, I could have just agreed with you at the beginning,
That's
but
right.
look, now we've got 3 scenarios that this could have played out when.
Yeah.
Your scenario seems likely. The third scenario, which agrees with you, also seems likely, and my scenario doesn't seem as likely anymore.
Feels
And I had to admit that I'm wrong.
It feels good. It's been a good night.
It's been a good night, hasn't it?
I know yesterday I threw up 5 times, but
Well,
still feeling pretty good.
you have a little bit of that
Yeah.
from time to time.
All right. You want to start up with the rest of this less exciting stuff?
Right. I think we're on 18 and 21.
Then his brothers also went and fell down before his face, and they said, Behold, where are your servants? Joseph said to them, Do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. So therefore, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. So I guess we could rehash the old discussion about free will versus God's meddling in the affairs of humans, but let's not, because let's not. It's very circuitous, you know? It doesn't seem like there's really an answer. Yeah. Anyhow, so either his brothers did a bad thing and God used it for good, or God made them do the bad thing so he could use it for good, or he made them do bad because he knows the future and knew it would end up good, or they did bad all by themselves and God allowed it because he knew the future. Those are the 4 options.
Yeah, the whole free will versus choice is wild in the Joseph narrative. As far as I can tell, there's no true free will happening here, or they have freedom of choice, but God has like knew ahead of time that it would happen and has like altered certain parameters to make it work out in a particular way, kind of like what he did with Hagar and Ishmael. So I don't know. That's hard. But the other thing too is like he's saying like by having this happen, many lives were saved. Right? So God did all this. He did all of this so that he can save all these lives. But like, I don't know, could he not also just not have a famine?
Yeah.
Right? Was there not a alternative means? Because now, if we assume that this was all orchestrated, is God not in control of the weather in Genesis? It seems like he's not, but in the other parts of the Bible, he is.
I mean, it's all confusing. It's the same problem I have with prayer, where something bad happens and people say, okay, we got to pray to God. And I'm like,
Right.
Why didn't God just not do the thing? Does God go about doing terrible things so he can get prayers?
Right, because how many people died and were enslaved and suffered hardships because of the famine?
Yeah, how many do you think more people died from the famine than from Joseph coming around. I don't know. I mean, of course, the idea is that the famine was going to happen anyhow, right?
It kind of feels like God was trying to kill everybody except for Joseph and his family, because tons of people died,
Right.
just not God's favorite people,
Right.
right? But if God really is in control of all of these elements, right? He's, pulling all the levers.
Mm-hmm.
You have to assume that he was in charge of that famine,
Mm-hmm.
and that,
I mean, what are the odds of there being what was it, a 5-year famine and a 5-year not, or
it was 7 and
something?
7, yeah.
Yeah, what are the odds of that?
I think it was 7 and 7, wasn't it?
I mean,
Anyways,
pretty
but
numbers.
yeah,
But what are the odds of that happening with God? Without God, I mean, without God,
being symmetrical like that, and the dreams being given.
with yeah, oh yeah. So I mean, he just happened to know that there were going to be 5 years of surplus and 5 years of
Right.
crappiness.
Right.
I mean, obviously, it sounds like maybe he had something to do with it. And if he had anything at all to do with it, there's a lot of blood on his hands.
It's kind of my feeling about it. If God did orchestrate everything, well, yeah, it's great that he saved Joseph and Jacob and the rest of the family,
Yeah.
including the women and children that were kidnapped and whatnot. But he also killed countless people over the course of a famine. I can only I can only assume that he wanted those people to be killed in the famine.
I'm sure there's a lot of people who would say that's the reason, right?
But if God wanted those people dead, why wouldn't he just snap his fingers and do it? I don't.
I
That-
mean, he's
it'd be
done
like
done that before
I know exactly. He did with Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean,
with all of the Jacob's. Was that Jacob? There's really bad ones.
there's a number of people in the Bible that
Uh,
God just smites.
or something.
Onan's brothers.
Yeah. Who is who?
It
Yeah.
was Er and what was the other brother's name?
I don't know.
I forget now too.
But they were both.
But there's two of them. Yeah,
They were just bam.
he
killed.
just smote them. Yeah,
Yeah.
basically.
He didn't, send a famine.
Yeah, isn't that odd that God would use a famine? And do you not? Would we assume that every individual that died in the famine were innocent or wicked, or like? Remember Abraham when during the Sodom and Gomorrah is like, surely you wouldn't let the righteous die alongside the wicked, right?
Yeah.
So are we required to assume that the people who died in the famine had to have all been wicked people, and God only allowed the righteous ones to live?
I think the only way the only choice we have is to assume God didn't have any hand in the famine,
Right.
even though.
But if that's the case, then how weak is God that he can only react to the weather
Oh.
rather than cause it?
I don't know. They have these arguments that say, I mean, the famines are just part of life.
Right.
But if that's true, then why does God step in ever?
Yeah.
Like, why does he choose to step in after everybody's died instead of at the beginning?
Right.
I don't know.
I think that's why so many people view natural disasters and things like that as like God's judgment, because surely God wouldn't allow the innocent to die alongside of the guilty, right?
I remember there was a tornado that, killed a lot of people and all that. And somebody's house got destroyed. But then they're like, but look at this Bible. It's perfectly fine. This is a sign. And I'm like, I don't think that's a sign.
I don't think so.
A sign would have been maybe not
sending the tornado.
Yeah, right? You
Yeah.
know? But no, my Bible's safe.
I know. It's wild.
Yeah.
Let's read the 22 and 23. And then we're almost done, actually. That might be the last of it. No, the 26. Okay, so we'll do 22, 23.
We're going to have to talk real slowly then, huh? If we want to get out of here after 9.
Well, we got plenty of time.
I know. But we want to get out of here after 9.
I don't know why you want to keep making this longer and longer.
What am I going to do tonight, huh?
I mean, we can talk after we're done.
Oh, I guess that's a thing.
We don't have to talk on live stream.
I think we do. All right.
All right, good.
20 to 23.
Right.
So Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's household, and Joseph lived 110 years. Joseph saw Ephraim's children to the 3rd generation. The children of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were also brought up on Joseph's knees. So their lives grew shorter and shorter until they hit the average lifespan of the contemporary human being. I think we discussed earlier the reason everyone lived so long before the flood was due to a mathematical error, and therefore the writers were using bad information and trying to figure out why, if people lived so long before, why do they have such comparatively short lifespans? So they had to fudge the numbers. Is this correct? Is this that you told me that, right?
Not those exact words, but there is kind of this idea in
Mhm.
Genesis that the lifespan of people are going to be shortened. The problem is there's multiple interpretations. What does it mean? What is 120 referring to the time between the warning and the flood? Certainly not. I've done the math on that. It's only like 89 years.
Say that again. The warning of the flood and the flood.
No, what I'm saying is how many years were between the warning of the flood and the flood?
That's what I just said.
Exactly. It couldn't have been referring to that because that was only 89 years. But the problem is if we apply it to the lifespan of the people living,
Yeah.
that's also problematic because immediately after God gives that command, a bunch of people are living past 120. So the only way we can
Where? What command?
that his soul will not abide with man past 120 years.
Where was that?
Like Genesis chapter 6
No,
or
I
7.
mean, what story was that from?
Before the flood.
Before the flood? But why?
Why what?
I don't remember this.
It was your question.
Just now?
Yeah.
I thought I thought that there were only maybe like stories of people living a long time. But people believed them enough that they had to reconcile it with their current short lifespans, and so they figured, okay, well, the flood is a good cutoff, so we'll just make it so everybody before the flood lived a long time, and everybody after the flood didn't live a long time. When in
Right,
reality, nobody really ever lived a long time.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. That's why you have the warning right before the flood that the days of man will not be longer than 120 years.
Right.
Right? As an explanation for why
Yeah.
the lifespans are getting shorter. What I'm
Right.
saying is the only problem with that interpretation is that even after the flood, people are living well past 120.
Well, I mean,
It
not
wasn't exactly a sharp cutoff.
not well past. I mean, 160 was probably the biggest, right?
I
The
don't know.
longest. I'm telling you then.
Because the king of Gerar was like 160 something years old, and Abraham was like 175, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a pretty big,
Yeah, but they're going down slowly.
That's what I'm saying. It's going down slowly. If we take it to mean 120 years, obviously it's impossible to interpret that passage as being a sharp cutoff. Like from now on, this is what's going to happen. It seems like God, like gradually weaned people off of living for hundreds
I
of
mean, that
years.
sounds more likely what he would do anyhow, right?
I would think so.
You know, I mean,
God's not prone to doing super drastic things like flooding the entire
no,
planet.
It's just, what if you're going to be around for 160 years and all of a sudden your children are going to be around for like 80 years? That's going to be hard to deal with. You know what I mean?
No, I agree, and I think your suggestion is right. I think the narrative in Genesis is trying to gradually decrease the years to go from these really crazy historical numbers, which probably weren't true,
Mm,
to get to a more realistic number. And I think there's a couple of ways in which they do that,
mm-hmm.
right? But I think the method that you're suggesting here by gradually decreasing it, I think makes the most sense.
Okay.
It's a very good observation.
Oh, thank you. Let's do right now. So, yeah. So,
Uh-huh.
I'm just reading what I wrote and seeing if it makes enough sense to read it now.
Right.
So it's like, so if they had known that people didn't actually live, several hundred years or what have you, maybe the authors would have written their origin story differently, because Genesis is still their origin story, right?
Yeah. And a lot of it was probably written in the Babylonian exile. And the Babylonians had a rich tradition of ancient kings and leaders that lived for hundreds and hundreds of years at a time. And that may have coincided with things that they might have already believed about their ancient ancestors. And so it just kind of, it got codified into the text.
So you do wonder why different civilizations all have these ideas that we used to live a long time.
I don't know anyone else beside the
Well,
ancient Near East.
Well, that's two right there,
Yeah.
right?
Well, the Israelites were a product of the ancient Near East. They are
Oh.
emergent from it,
So it's just the one.
basically.
Well, I mean, you know about other civilizations in the world that were coming about this time, right?
Yeah.
Did anybody else discuss
I'm not
about-
aware of them. No, like in like Turkey or Mycenae or even in Egypt, I'm not aware of any ancient kings that or patriarchs that lived for hundreds of years.
So you're saying that so they had to, before the flood, give them longer lives because that was just the prevailing belief.
I think so.
Here's a problem.
At the time of writing.
Yeah.
But I think it was fictitious. I think it was a misunderstanding of the ancient numerical system.
So that's what they believed. The
Right.
people who wrote that.
It's-
So if like Abraham lived to be like 200 or something.
yeah.
No. Say they thought he lived to be 200, but say he lived to be 100. Okay. What does that do to the timeline?
Not much.
Because it truncates it down.
Yeah.
Everything that ever happened needs to be shifted.
Yeah,
Right?
if these people that live for hundreds of years didn't actually live for hundreds
Right.
of years, and it basically is suggesting that rather than the world being created in like 4000 BCE, maybe it was really created in like 3000 BCE.
Mhm. But I mean, that moves all the timelines up, you know?
Yeah, you would basically be forced to believe that the Earth is really only about 4,000 years old, as opposed to 6,000, which I think both estimates are silly.
The point is just that you've seen so many timelines of all the, of Genesis and all that. And there's, a lot of arguments about, how they're off by a little bit.
They are. And that's actually the comment that I had on this particular section. And you're not going to believe this.
Okay.
I think the timeline is spot on this time.
Okay.
Because listen to what it says in the passage.
Oh.
It says, Joseph saw Ephraim's children into the third generation. So I was like, well, that's interesting. Because, like, how many years were they in Egypt? And so I was like, well, I'm curious, I just want to look up the children of Ephraim since they're mentioned and see who they were. So I went to Chronicles where it lists them. And there were a number of generations, I think 9 or 10 generations. And I was just curious because remember, who was important that came from Ephraim? Joshua, the son of Nun, the famous warrior during the exile, the conquest period, right?
Maybe.
So I was just kind of curious. Okay, how many generations does Chronicles record between Ephraim and between Joshua, the son of Nun? Because we can positively date how many years existed between those two figures.
So who's Nun again?
Joshua, the son of Nun.
So who's Nun again?
The father of Joshua.
Now, who's the father of Nun?
No one cares. What I'm suggesting
Okay.
is that Genesis 15 states that they were in Egypt for 400 years, 430 if you include how long Joseph was there before them. But anyways, they were there 400 years. We know for a fact that Joshua, the son of Nun, basically came during the Exodus period, right before at the time of the conquest. Okay, so we know there was about 400 to 430 years between Ephraim and between Joshua. So I thought, well, just for fun, let me count the generations to see if the math adds up. Because sometimes it'll say dumb stuff like that, like, well, this all happened in 400 years. But then when you look at the number of people born, like, well, that obviously didn't happen unless they all had children at age 10, right? So I looked up the generations in Chronicles, and this is one time where like everything actually adds up. Not only does it all add up, but I have a timeline of the patriarchs, and it chronologically, it's possible as well that Jacob lived long enough to actually see the third generation of Manasseh. Of course, this assumes that they all had children very young, like 18 to 20. But mathematically, it's plausible, right? So anyways, the long and short of it is, from the time that Jacob dies to the time that Joseph dies is 54 years. Now this is where it gets interesting because Ephraim was already born at the time of Jacob's death. We know that. So the question is, how old was Ephraim when Jacob died? Well, Ephraim, I calculated, is anywhere between 25 and 20 years old, based on the timeline, because we have ages given in Genesis 41. So that being the case, according to the timeline, if Ephraim at the time of Jacob was already 19 or 20, and then another 54 years passes, if we assume that at the time he was blessed at age 19, 20, 22, if we assume he was already married and that he immediately had a family, and then that his children had children at roughly the same age, then it is possible, even though it seems unrealistic to some people, it's possible that verse 23, where it says, Joseph saw Ephraim's children even to the third generation, that is not an impossible statement. And I looked all this up because when I first read it, I thought it seems implausible because how long could he have lived? But I think it is possible if we assume that there were short generations and that Ephraim was right about to have a child at the time of the death. So all that to say, if somebody says it seems unrealistic that he saw his third generation of grandchildren, it is mathematically plausible. I don't know how likely, but it's plausible.
Yeah. You know what? Honestly, I love these things where we have to take plausible.
Right.
You know what I mean? So many things are not.
Right. You have to take the plausible when it comes.
Pick your wins.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
You ready for this one?
Last 3 verses.
24 to 26.
This is the last of Genesis. Is this bittersweet for you? The very last 3 verses of Genesis?
It's pretty bitter.
You gonna sleep well tonight?
I just want to get into the other ones.
You want to do Exodus?
Yeah.
Exodus is fun.
But I want it to I want it to be done in less than a year.
Well, we'll do what we can.
No. Let's do more than we can. Let's do this like 3 times a week.
Not gonna happen.
3 times. Twice.
Unless you're gonna start paying me a salary. I don't think that's gonna happen. I have to go to work.
How much do I need to pay you?
I don't know. I make pretty good money at work.
I can't afford that.
I know.
Whatever it is you make, I can't afford, okay? Because I don't make good money at all.
Don't worry. 24, 26.
All right. And Joseph said to his brethren, I am dying, but God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land to the land of which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph took an oath from the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. Now, I didn't know they used coffins back then. I guess I just assumed it would be similar to Jesus, like a shroud of cloth or something. Isn't that weird that they would use coffins back then, but then like thousands of years later, they just use a shroud? Maybe I'm missing something. I know that the stone was supposed to be a coffin. You know what I mean? But still.
Well, I think this happened because it's in Egypt. If they were back in Canaan, I don't think they would have put him in a coffin.
I guess we've seen those Egyptian coffins, right? Sarcophagus.
Yeah. Sarcophagi?
Yeah.
Yeah. What language is that? Is that Latin?
It's got to be Latin. Just by the way, it's a U.S. and an I. Right.
But that's my thought. My thought is that
I was looking up the Latin declensions not that long ago. All right, go ahead.
Let's say my thought is that they're doing this only because they're in Egypt.
Okay.
Yeah. And he was basically Egyptian.
Right. And he was, pretty hot stuff.
I mean,
he's a big dog.
He was high up on the
big
food
dog.
chain.
Yeah. He was probably, he's at least 1/3 God, right?
You would think so. If Pharaoh is God or partly God, then Joseph must be third, fourth, fifth God.
That sounds fair.
At least a pinky finger full God. I don't know.
That's right.
The question I had is going back kind of the free will debate or the God predestining things to happen. It says, God will surely visit you and carry my bones up from here.
Hmm.
So like Joseph is saying like, hey, God's going to take you out of here, which is kind of just previewing the Exodus that's about to come. But like the thing of it is, like the only up to now, we've been told multiple times they're going to, twice I think, that they're going to go into Egypt and then come out of Egypt. But it's odd that there's only one explanation so far as to why. We're going to spend over 400 years in Egypt.
Hmm.
And literally the only explanation so far has been because the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. That's it. That's all we've got so far. You would think there'd be a more robust explanation for being subjugated for 400 years in
I'm
Egypt.
sorry. The iniquity of the Amor. I don't know what that meant. I know you said it before, but I don't know what it means.
It basically means
Who are the Amorites again?
the Amorites are, it's a colloquial term for the Canaanites.
So the Canaanites haven't suffered enough. No, they haven't done enough to deserve their suffering.
Their sin hasn't amounted to enough for a guilty verdict, if that makes sense.
No, yeah. So why do they need to be slaves again?
But that's what I'm suggesting here is knowing what was going to happen, knowing they were going to be there for 400 years, knowing they're going to be enslaved.
Mm-hmm.
It seems silly to me that God is keeping his chosen people in Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
predestined to be there for
Mhm.
400 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the only excuse that we're given so far.
Oh, it's because he doesn't want them to go into Canaan and vanquish them yet, or what have you, because they're not evil enough.
Well,
So they got to go somewhere.
that's what I'm saying,
Right?
is he's not ready to judge the Amorites yet for
Right.
their sin,
Mhm.
right? But in this period of waiting for the Amorites' sin to become great enough, then he has to keep Israel in Egypt away from the Amorites, obviously.
Right, yeah.
And then they get subjugated. Now remember, God knows all of this is going to happen if God is all knowing, right?
Yeah.
So this is what drives me crazy. God knew everything that was going to happen. He knew they were going to be enslaved in Egypt. He knew they would have to wipe out the Amorites. Why are you waiting and having thousands of your own innocent, hundreds of thousands maybe, of your own innocent people suffer in Egypt when you already know you're just going to wipe out the Amorites to begin with? Why not just wipe them out and send them on in?
I don't know.
What are you waiting for?
That gets into a whole different thing because God, of course, knows all. So why even anything? Why even anything?
Right.
Why even have Satan around when God knew he was going to fall?
Well, Satan doesn't make any sense.
No.
If you're someone who knows the future and you're all powerful, Satan makes absolutely no sense. You would not create a malevolent being for no other purpose than to torment humanity.
Right. But I mean, you're gonna have to reconcile that if with us, you know what I mean? Because God is in both cases, he knows something bad is gonna happen in the future, but doesn't do anything about it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, he causes it.
Well, so I mean, I get that. Okay, so these guys are going to be bad in the future, but obviously, just because I know they're going to be bad in the future doesn't mean I can punish them now. Because I think we all agree that punishing someone for something they haven't done is wrong, even if we know they're going to.
But he's going to anyways.
But
he's going to. There'll be thousands of innocent women and children that get slaughtered in the land of Canaan when they take it over anyways.
Well, how do we know that? Maybe they're all guilty.
That's silly. To believe that every man, woman, and child living in the land of Canaan was somehow guilty of some crime that was so great that they needed to be slaughtered.
Well, I mean, the men and the women and the children, they got taken as slaves, right? They don't kill them, do they?
No, of the Canaanites, you had to kill all of them: men, women, child, cattle, everything got completely slaughtered.
But
the
children
babies' heads smashed against stones.
The Israelites did that?
Yeah.
Smashed babies' heads?
How you killed babies. If you didn't kill them with the sword, you smash their head on
I
a
assume
stone.
that's not in the Bible, though.
Yeah, it is. Psalm 139.
Smashing a child's
Yes.
head?
Yeah, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
And God even says when he brings punishment upon Israel that there will come and they'll dash your babies' heads against the stones.
Who?
Well, the invading armies, because that's how they killed babies
Well,
back
yeah,
then.
but I'm asking, did the Israelites do that?
Yeah.
What was it? Psalm something?
Yeah, it's 139, yeah.
139.
The women, the Israelites engaged in all the terrible war practices that everybody else did. There were no, God didn't give them any war limits or anything like that. In fact, in Deuteronomy chapter 20 and 21, he tells you can kidnap the women and children and keep them as booty.
Well, yeah, but there's certainly a bit of a line there, isn't there?
I don't know. Well, in Numbers 31, he says to kill all the little boys.
Well, do they mean boys or do they mean like guys who are like 20 or something?
Those little boys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to make a justification. I'm trying to soften the.
I know. It's a tough thing to take in that God lets people do atrocities in war.
Well, not just lets, but.
Kind of commands it.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't see this in 139, to be honest.
Give me my Bible. It's a Deuteronomy.
You said Psalm.
Oh, you're still looking for Psalm 139.
I found it. I just don't know what it says.
It could be 137. I might have the
boy.
wrong one.
Now I gotta go back.
Is happy is he who dashes a baby's head against a stone.
It says, for the director of music of David, a psalm. Happy is he.
Let's see. It could be 137. You could just Google it. Just look it up. Just Google happy is he who dashes
Why do I have to
infant's
do
head against a
that?
stone.
I thought you were gonna give me the answer.
Oh, I already got it. It's 137.
Well-
137 verse 9.
All right, hold on.
It says, happy shall they be who take your little ones and dash them against the rock. Because that's what that's what you did in
Happy
war.
is the one who seizes your infant. Why who psalms? Aren't those like songs or something?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wait, what's a psalm? That's a song of praise, right? Isn't that?
No, it's just a psalm.
Is-
It could be praise. It could be lament.
Oh, really?
It also shows up in Jeremiah 50 and Lamentations chapter 4. When they're when their babies are dashed against the rocks, God commands that to happen. So Deuteronomy 20. This is what it says to do to the Canaanite cities.
Mm-hmm.
Says of the non-Canaanite cities, it says you will put the males to the sword. You may, however, take as your booty the women, the children, and the livestock, and everything else in the town as spoil. You may enjoy the spoil of your enemies, which the Lord your God has given to you. Thus you will treat all the towns that are very far from you, which are not the towns of the nations here. But as for the towns of the people that the Lord your God is giving into your hands as inheritance, you must not let anything that breathes remain alive. You will annihilate them. The Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, just as the Lord your God has commanded. So the Canaanites didn't get to live, unfortunately. They were completely annihilated. But the people that lived further out, they were unalived, by the sword.
Yeah.
And then the women and children were taken captives.
Okay.
Pretty standard fare.
Pretty standard fare.
Yeah.
This is gonna be great talking about this stuff.
It's the conquest period can get rough.
Yeah. All of it's rough.
Yeah.
I mean, it certainly supports being, God being pro-abortion, though, I guess, huh?
Well, yeah, Numbers chapter 5, God gives them a test to specifically induce abortions if you're unfaithful to your husband. Yeah.
I don't know how other Christians can be like, God is pro-life, and then read the Bible and still say that.
I think there's a case to be made either way, to be honest. I think it just depends on which passages you read and which ones you exclude.
Well, you're not allowed to exclude passages.
Right.
Exclude passages. What I said.
Right. And I think most people tend to exclude like Numbers chapter 5 because they don't know it even exists.
Say that again? Oh, yeah, right. Well,
Right. No one's reading the Torah. When's the last time you met a Christian that was reading through the book of Numbers and Deuteronomy? Not very.
No.
Anyways, I don't know. Should we say anything else about the ending here?
So, are you telling me that God gave Joseph a vision of the future, which is why Joseph said that?
Yeah. He must have.
And Joseph was okay with this.
Apparently.
You know what I mean? Because, I mean, he's pretty cryptic, but I mean...
Well, he says that God will bring them out of Egypt, but he didn't say anything beyond that.
So do you think God maybe didn't tell him everything? Just said, hey, you know?
It's hard to say because remember in Genesis 15, he told Abraham that they were going to spend 400 years.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Yeah.
So somebody was told.
That's true.
Right?
Now we just got to figure out why they were punished.
Right.
So terribly.
Right, yeah.
Right?
So far, the only reason we have is that the sin of the Amorites was not completed yet.
Well, I think another reason was because God brought them into Egypt because of the famine, and they just never left.
Well, that could be part of it, but remember that seems to be preordained. God says in Genesis 15 that they're going to stay 400 years there. And the reason for the 400 years is because the iniquity has not yet been completed.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, here's another reason.
Sure.
Because they had it so good in Egypt, they're like, we're not going to go back.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
No, I agree.
All right. Here's some more reasons.
Anyways,
maybe if we get enough really stupid reasons, we can just say, they're all good enough. You know, they equal one good reason. I don't know.
I think that's good enough as a recap for Genesis chapter 50. Next week, we're going to be doing a review of everything we've learned, questions that remain outstanding. What else? Might be it.
Yeah, no, I started working on them. It's very slow.
Yeah. Okay.
Very slow. I think I'm on first one.
Well, it should be exciting.
But that counts as working on it.
Can't wait.
You know, now I know more about Genesis than 99% of Christians.
That's accurate. Yeah, most Christians aren't really reading their Bible.
Right. Especially not Genesis, right?
Right.
You know, I mean, well, they're reading in the beginning, you know, and then like, I'm out.
They like the creation narrative and the fall of Adam and Eve, and then they hit genealogies in chapter 5, and are like, I don't know about this.
And like, let's skip to the New Testament here.
Right. Right. Yeah. Most people don't know the ins and outs of the Jacob narrative or the Joseph narrative or
the religion that they based their whole life around.
Right.
The religion that they, blame for hating everybody.
Right.
You know what I mean?
If you're going to use a religion to hate other people, you should understand it better than everybody else.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
At least know what's in the book.
At least, yeah.
Before you try to hurt people with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Well, that's it for the weekend.
That's it.
Guys, thank you so much for being here. This is signing off from Genesis.
Now,
next time we see you,
give us some
recap.
mailbags questions, all right? Give us some flipping mailbag questions, all right?
Yeah, I want some good questions and answers.
I'm gonna be making some up, and the usernames are gonna be so fake. It's gonna be so obvious. You know what I mean? It'll be like Justin Fan 1 or something.
You're not supposed to say that in the video that they're commenting on.
All right, ignore what I said. Hey, we'll cut it out. We'll cut it out, man.
All right.
This is 2 hours, but we're gonna cut it down to probably like 45 minutes.
It's almost 3 hours now.
I don't know how you
remember when you thought we were going to do this for like an hour?
How does 2 hours and 12 minutes get rounded up to 3?
Oh, we must have started late. It's okay.
What?
Time flies when you're having fun.
Does it? We started late. I got here at 6:15. No, yeah. I got here at 6.
I was thinking we started a little before 6:30, but we didn't. Obviously,
no. We started about 6:20.
Oh, it's about 6:20. Okay, yeah. So yeah,
I think the math checks out, sort of.
Yeah, so we've been live for 2 hours and 15 minutes almost. And
yes, that's a math.
So almost 2.5 hours then.
Yeah.
But if we get past 2:15, we can round up.
Well, you wanna?
No, we're done.
I don't think that works.
Let's put a fork in chapter 50.
You just have to round up to 30. I don't think
we're just gonna round down. All right, guys.
We're rounding down. Bye, guys.
Have a great night.
Bye.
You got the mouse. I can't do anything.
All right.
You got to end it.